All I'm saying is beware of propaganda. That ain't Ukraine. That's Newcastle. That's the old Odeon. I took the photograph. Ukraine. Oh, we just had Zelenskyy across in the UK on the circuit, obviously asking for more support, more arms, more weapons, and combat aeroplanes. There's a number of questions that people perhaps need to be asking before the UK proceeds down this road to ever increasing involvement with what's going on in Ukraine. First thing they should ask themselves is, what does a victory actually look like? Victory, apparently, to the Ukrainians is all the Ruskies out of Ukraine and out of Crimea. Ukraine in NATO, full membership, and Ukraine in the EU. The last two, you could possibly argue, are in the futures. But the first one, all the Ruskies out of sovereign Ukraine, the land that Ukraine says is Ukraine. The difficulty that I have with that is I find it difficult to imagine the first one can happen. All the Ruskies out of Ukraine. In all of this, in this last year, and all the terrible things, and it is terrible, make no doubts about that. Tens of thousands, probably, of people have died in Ukraine on both sides. What seems to be lacking in any of this is any talk of peace, any talk of a settlement, any talk of getting this thing resolved. Normally in wars, one or two things happens. Either the two protagonists get to a point where they've both been bloodied and they can both see the struggle going on indefinitely, perhaps, and they decide to make an agreement. Enough's enough. Let's call it quits. We'll agree. You get this, I get that, blah, blah, blah. Nobody gets everything that they want. But what they do want is that the hostilities stop. That's the first thing that normally happens in wars. Second thing that normally happens in wars is that one side is dominant. One side triumphs. One side wins. One side is the conqueror. And they get unconditional surrender. The opposition lies prone before them, and it's up to the winner to be magnanimous and decide what to do with them. That's what happened at the end of WW2. The Allies said to the Germans and to the Japanese, unconditional surrender. We're not negotiating, unconditional surrender. That presupposes that you're prepared to fight for an extended period of time with the chance that you could get beat and that you will ultimately prevail. And this is the line that Zelenskyy sort of mirroring Churchill's words. And Churchill has allegedly a special place in Britain because of his defiant stand against the Germans in World War II. But Churchill isn't universally liked or endorsed by everybody in the UK for some of the stances, some of the positions that he took versus working people, and also some of the actions which he took during the First World War and Second World War that cost a lot of people their lives. But if we take the line that Zelenskyy is trying to mirror, Churchill's this, and he's saying this, and end of this, and start of that, blah, 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 and two fingers and victory, you know, and we will end up, and we will be victorious. You just need to give us some more money, some more tanks, and some more combat aeroplanes. This suits the hawks, especially in the United States and in the UK. The parliamentarians seem to park the first priority, which is to the British people. Defence of the realm and protection of the people. I'm not too sure how either of those two things fit in with us supporting Ukraine to the extent that's going on. There's no problem helping the refugee people. I've got no big problems with that. I've got no problem giving them aid. I've got no problem with lots of the stuff. I have got a problem when we start giving them tanks, aeroplanes, stuff which will continue the war and possibly extend it, and lots more people are going to get killed because of this. Because I can't see option one, all the Ruskies get kicked out of all of Ukraine and Crimea. I just can't foresee that. So, okay, you're just a Putin puppet. You're just taking the Ruski side of it. We don't want people like you. We want people who are gung-ho. We want people that's going to get out there and we're going to kick them Ruskies out. Yeah, fine. Okay. We've travelled these roads before. We've seen how they end up. The amount of toil, blood, sweat, tears that goes into wars. We've seen that Britain has been one of the first to want to jump into these conflicts. Then on the reverse side, you flip it and you say, these other countries that kind of like don't want to get involved in this, take a look at their education systems. Oh, take a look at their healthcare system. You just, democracy, democracy. Yeah, these countries are democratic. These countries have parliaments just the same as us. But they don't want to go headlong running into this thing for an undisclosed amount of time. You can already see parts of the people in Euroland walking some of this back. Well, maybe you might be able to join the EU, but not for a pretty long time, because basically, you know, we've run the numbers in Ukraine. Yeah, it's pretty corrupt. That's all been parked while the hostilities have been ongoing. But if you remember a little while back, Zelenskyy bladdered a load of people for being corrupt. This is during the war. Recently happened. Euroland people are saying, maybe it's not so. Maybe it's not. Join NATO. Yeah, really? But the people in NATO, you know, the military, the brass, all of this, the scrambled egg people, yeah, oh, yes, yeah, let's have a toe-to-toe with the Ruskies. They've got some really good tanks and we've got the best aeroplanes and we'll just wipe them Ruskies off. It'll be a turkey shoot. No need, you know, NATO, we've got the best, we've got the best strategies and the tactics and the stuff. And by the way, all of the planes that we're probably using, apart from a few from Sweden and places like that, are all Yankee stuff. They're all American hardware that most of Europe tends to use. We stand behind America in NATO. All of the countries do, because the military power that the United States has is far in excess of any of the European countries. All of them out and by the Euroland, having that one army and stuff like that. Has it come to anything? No, not a beam. Will it come to anything? Not really. Because they can get away with not spending money on defence and spend it on social spending in that country, or keep their taxes slightly lower. Zelensky's saying, I need the planes. But if you remember back to the start, I need the rifles, and I need the bullets, and then it was I need the mortars, and then I need the howitzers, and I need the bigger guns, and then I need in step by step, inch by inch, or in case of Zelenskyy, centimetre by centimetre. The UK, along with other countries, has walked down, giving them more and more armaments, higher grade. Training people, the UK is training Ukrainians to do whatever it is that's been agreed. Obviously, they're handing over tanks. They'll be training them in tanks. Zelenskyy wants airplanes. Once they have the skies across Ukraine. There's people, NATO people, there's other people said, yeah, NATO should have a no-go fly zone in places like that. I just think people are walking blindfolded. Politicians, this is taking Britain in step by step. It's very easy to get into a conflict. It's very easy to start wars off. It's incredibly hard sometimes to back out of them, especially when there's bloodshed being spilled on both sides. To me, it's reminiscent of the slow dance that happened in the First World War for about a month or 6 weeks prior to World War I really kicking off. When Britain realistically should have been able to negotiate a peace deal to keep it from bubbling up. There's too many people that want to see this continue. Military people, people with fingers in the pot, people that make the armaments, and the politicians. They stand there, Zelenskyy gives his little speech. He's been on the TV thing when he gave it to Parliament, the old clap and stuff like that. Wars involve people dying. British politicians, along with probably politicians in most countries, won't want their sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers, or anybody like that getting killed in the armed forces in a war. But they'll vote for it. They'll vote to give them munitions. They'll vote to give them the money. What I don't hear is anybody pushing for peace in the politician side. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm just saying I'm not hearing it. I hear democracy and all of this infant school, playground, nonsensical democracy. We've got to fight the Ruskies in Ukraine land. Otherwise, the Ruskies, next they'll be in Latvia and Latvia and Latvia and Poland and the Czech Republic, and they'll be driving up the Champs-Élysées, man. That's after they've ploughed through Berlin, past the tanks, which is outside the Reichstag. The Russians were there before. The Germans kicked it off. The Russians finished it. They'll be driving up the Mall to Buckingham Palace to have an audience with King Charles. This is, to my mind, the rhetoric which you get out of people, politicians, warmongers, hawks, that unless we stop the Ruskies now, then we'll be fighting them on the Dover beaches. Apart from Afghanistan and the countries bordering Russia, you could argue about Syria and the assistance and stuff like that. Since Russia turned into Russia in the late 90s, before it was the USSR, and obviously it invaded Hungary, put down what they called an uprising, and obviously had the Prague Summer in '60 and stuff like that. The Russians haven't made any territorial requests, demands on Western Europe. I haven't seen it or heard it. So I can't go along with this, that give them an inch and they'll take a mile, give them a centimetre and they'll be taking a kilometre. I can't go along with it. I'm dismayed by the politicians in this country. There's one man in the world could stop this war and get a peace settlement. He resides in the White House. Now, whether it's Biden or the people behind him that control Biden, President Biden, that is, if the Americans turned around and said, we're not giving you any more money, and we're not giving you any more armaments, you need to sit down with the Ruskies, because this is getting real serious here. The main thing is we need to avoid World War III. Fine, you're just going to have to suck it up. You're just going to have to accept that Crimea is part of Russia, and you're just going to have to give some land up. Because that's far better than what the other outcome is. Just let's work this scenario one through, where we give them planes and tanks and boats and whatever else. And by some method, the Ruskies are pushed out of every square centimetre of Crimea. Lucky Ukraine's won with all of the ensuing help from the Western countries. Just let's assume that one. Do you think the Russians are going to accept it militarily? Do you honestly think that? It's Putin. It's Putin. He's the problem. If we can beat the Ruskies on the battlefield, then somebody will take Putin out in Moscow and everything will be dory hunky again. You go, what happens? Fine, okay, what happens? Let's just say that Putin is taken out. Is it a coin flip that we'll get somebody more reasonable, someone who's even a harder line than Putin? I don't know about Russian politics to be able to say that. There's no guarantees. The other thing is, if you push Russia so far into a corner, you push them out of Crimea and stuff like that, other armaments then get put on the table. Putin's already told them. The people in NATO just blithely don't want to accept it. or they're thinking, nah, he's never going to do that. Perhaps he will, perhaps he won't. I wouldn't like to be the person that's playing poker with him, though. When you see what the chips are in the middle that you're playing for. You know, we're talking about World War III. If nukes get used, then it's World War III. President Biden's just said, he said this is the closest that the it sounds nonsensical. This is the closest that the world's been to a nuclear war since that island that's just off America, you know, Cuba, since '62, whenever it was. That's 60 years ago. We're at the closest. I don't see anybody on the team of horses that's running away, trying to restrain them and pull them back, trying to calm them down, trying to say enough is enough, trying to say, hey, Zelenskyy, get yourself sat down with Putin and his lads, try and work something out. You're just going to have to accept that you're going to have to lose a bit of land. I don't think people understand how quickly things can go the wrong way. Think of the loss of British lives in all the foreign excursions that have been taken just after the Second World War. Korea, Suez, Gulfy Expedition 1, Gulfy Expedition 2, and you know, that barnstorming thing that we got involved with in Afghanistan. How have all of those worked out for Britain? How much better are people in Britain because of that? How many dead servicemen have ended up? It's democracy, though. Democracy. Take a look at Afghanistan now. Take a look at Iraq. The sanctions, we've just got to increase the sanctions even more. We're just not doing it. The sanctions are if we do it even more. The Western countries have just taken that big boulder of sanctions and it's fell on their foot. Hasn't stopped the Russians, might have slowed them down a bit. Russians out there looking for new pals. If you're not let we play football, we'll go around the corner and we'll find another bunch of lads to play football with. People in the BRICS countries, Brazil, possibly Argentina, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, India, and obviously the Chinese, have all said, hey, come on down, Ruskies. You know, if the Euro lot and the Yankees and the Brits won't let you play, hey, come and have a kick about with us. Is that a nice new Adidas ball you've got there, Ruskies? Yeah, we've got this new. Oh, come on down. Well, it could be in a Nike ball, you know what I mean. There's plenty of people in the world buying the oil off them. Okay, they might be getting as much money for it. Europe, okay. The big problem was the gas. There's no shortage. That sorted it out. That was because the Euroland people, and especially the Germans, were out there in about throughout the world scavenging and paying top euro, or bearing in mind that it's a gas contract, probably top dollar, to get gas supplies. In this case, liquefied natural gas. It's it's a lot more expensive than what Russian gas is. Oh, that shouldn't come into it. Not we'll, like, you know, like Kennedy was saying, you know, we'll pay any price, we'll carry any burden, blah, blah, and all the rest of the came. Not for the politicians, they don't have to pay any price or carry any burden. But that gets shifted onto the populace of the countries that these people are in charge of. The sanctions slowed the Russians down, haven't stopped them. They're forming stronger alliances with China now than what was previously there. The two countries are a good fit for each other. Russia has an abundance of natural resources, oil and gas, metals, fertilizers, foodstuffs. Chinese are more than happy to buy from the Russians. The good thing as well is that they'll probably be able to pay them in renminbi. That's the Chinese currency. That means the Chinese, they don't need to go and buy American dollars to pay for their stuff. President Joe Biden can sort this out, or the advisors or the people that pull his strings. But there doesn't seem to be any coalition of people that want to get this sorted out. You know, these people are at the poker table, we are all just sat in the background. But when you see if it can go wrong, the risk that you're putting, that's just phenomenal. Politicians seem to love these foreign adventures and escapades. Why? Because it gets them away from the mundane, having to actually sort out the things which people in places like the UK want them to do. NHS, you know, 7 million on the waiting list, 130,000 vacancies in the NHS, multiple groups of workers on strike, inflation above 10%. Yeah, but it'll be coming down. Yeah, but will the prices be coming down? But inflation will. Yeah, great. Cost of living. Other numerous problems. Now we'll just all be 100% behind Zelensky. Johnson, the ex-UK Prime Minister, in my mind, was a failure. He was a failure as a PM, and he was a failure as a leader. He's got a personality which is out there. Lots of people like him. It's easy to be drawn into his exuberant type of personality. When you look back, I don't think he's done anything positive for the UK. I think he's got a passing relationship with the betterment of the people of the UK. Liz Truss, the UK Prime Minister after Boris, to my mind, was a warmonger. The times when she was speaking with the Russians, the things that she said, her attitude, and just this belligerent, you're in the wrong, we're in the right. Maybe she is, and maybe he's there all. But these are the people, this is the reality. These are the people that you've got to deal with. These are the risks. Fine if you want to do it on an individual basis, but don't drag the whole of the UK into this. Ask yourself the question, what happens if the Russians drop a big one? Then work that through. There's a couple of scenarios that you can go through. The first thing is that the NATO countries zip and keep their mouths shut and play it down and don't decide to elevate the situation. Cool heads prevail. We ain't got Dr. Strangelove going off. Or we'll do something different. Increase the traditional forces. Give the Ukrainians even more planes and boats and push the Russians even further back. What happens if the Ruskies then do a second one, the second biggie? You can work it through yourself. Once people start playing big boys games like that, people start getting hurt in big times. At the moment, it's a relatively contained border dispute. Ooh, it's a war. Okay. At the moment, it's a relatively constrained war. It's taking place in eastern Ukraine. The ramifications with the sanctions, fine, okay, that's all over the world. But the actual fighting is only taking place in eastern Ukraine. Should be trying to power that down, calm it down, rugby tackling the ZELENSKYY guy and getting him to the table. If he won't comply, then perhaps they need to get somebody in Ukraine that will. This is far too serious to be in this boys' own world. Comic book stuff. Battlefield comic. Yeah, we'll beat the Ruskies. We've got the best tanks. We've got the best planes. That Tom Cruise picture. Yay. Top Gun 3. If the big ones start going off, then all bets are off the table. Nobody can tell you what's going to happen when that happens. But it'll not be good. I don't think so. You need to go back. Ask yourself, what's Russia asking for? What are they asking for? Is it something reasonable? Is it something you can live with? It's maybe it's not what you want, but maybe it's better than the alternatives. A lot of people keep harping back to the World War II. Russia is not that country anymore. It hasn't got that overbearing communist ability to expend thousands, millions of people in a war the way that it had when Germany invaded in 41. Russians lost a huge number of people. $20-odd million. some people say, you know, like 9 out of 10 people or whatever it was that died, or 8 out of 10 that died in World War II were Russians. Bulk of them Russian civilians. Oh, Russian citizens, should I say. I don't think the Russian people would want to continue in war. Why would anybody in Russia? Most people, you know, they want their kids to get a reasonable education. They want reasonable, decent paying jobs for themselves. And, you know, they want the normal stuff, functioning, working health service, being able to go on holiday, maybe he's upgrade the car, maybe he's have a little bit of a better food. There's not that many people want the wrong with the war. Beware of the propaganda on both sides. And you might have noticed that the background, then you might be saying, yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. Look at that building there behind him. Look at what the Russians have blown up in Ukraine. Beware of propaganda. That building's not in Ukraine. That building's in Newcastle. You might say, yeah, well, I knew Newcastle was rough, like, but that's the old Odeon pictures on Pilgrim Street in Newcastle. They're demolishing it to make an office block for the, I think it's the Department of Health and Social Security places. So you've probably, if anybody's managed to keep to the end here, you've probably sat and you've been thinking, yeah, terrible, Ukraine, look at that. All I'm saying is, beware of propaganda. That ain't Ukraine. That's Newcastle. That's the old Odeon. I took the photograph. It's just opposite the Central Library in Newcastle. So, push for peace. Stop this build-up. Get Ukraine, get Zelenskyy and Putin round the table, negotiate something. He can give the Ukrainians some sweetness. You know, we'll get you in the EU. Will the Russians agree it? I don't know. Let's try and get something going. We'll rebuild Ukraine. We'll give you money. Blah blah blah. But you've got to stop this insistence that you're going to kick the Russians out of Crimea and the rest of it. Thank you.